Hello students, I am Dr. Aruna Mohan from University of Delhi. We are in the process of understanding skeletal system. In the previous session, we have discussed part of axial skeleton, the skull and the vertebral column. We also talked about bones and cartilage. Now, after understanding that much, we can easily appreciate the skeletal system, the dorsal view and the ventral view. In this slide, I would like to show how our skeleton looks like when we look at it from dorsal side and how it looks like when we look at it from ventral side. Before that, let me explain you in our body which is the dorsal side and which is the ventral side. When you are watching me, the view you are seeing is my ventral side and my back is my dorsal side. So, in this particular diagram, you can see on one side you can see the ventral side where you are seeing the face, and where you are seeing the back in the other one is the dorsal side. You can see skull, which we have discussed in previous session. You can see limb bones, leg bones, also sternum, the rib cage, the girdles. We come to ventral side. These are the things which we have seen. In the dorsal side, you can very well appreciate that we are able to see girdle more clearly, the pectoral girdle, scapula, the pelvic girdle, ilium, ischium pubis, and also back side view of rib cage. You can see the vertebrae, and more importantly, you can see the connection of articulation of skull with the vertebral column in the neck area. So, this is roughly the view how our skeleton looks like from dorsal view and from the ventral view. After knowing this, we move forward to understand ribs. The ribs form part of axial skeleton. We know axial skeleton makes axis of the body, that is main axis, starting with skull, going up to vertebral column and then the ribs supporting vertebral column. We have 12 pairs of ribs. These ribs are connected dorsally to the vertebral column. I hope you understand what I mean by dorsally, that is the back side. It is connected to vertebral column, and on the front side, that is ventral side, connected to sternum. But there are some variations to be explained in case of different ribs. We are trying to understand how ribs are connected to vertebral column and the sternum. The ribs are connected on the dorsal side with the vertebral column. I am sure you understand what I mean by dorsal side and the vertebral column, and on the ventral side attached to the sternum, which is the front side. Out of 12 pairs of ribs, the first 7 pairs of ribs, they are attached dorsally to vertebral column and ventrally to sternum. Each of these 7 pairs of ribs, they have 2 articulation surfaces or 2 articulation points with which they are attached to vertebral column, and they are attached to sternum with a bit of cartilage. This is the detail of first 7 pairs of ribs. Coming to 8th, 9th and 10th pair of ribs, that is these 3 pair of ribs, they are of course attached dorsally to vertebral column, but ventrally they are not attached to sternum, but they are attached to 7th rib, that is last of the first 7 ribs. Coming to 11th and 12th pair of rib, both are attached dorsally with the vertebral column and then hanging free, not attached with the sternum, not attached with 7th rib, not attached with any other rib. So, If we try to have the full view of the 12 pair of ribs, the first 7th are attached on both the sides. On the dorsal side with vertebral column, on the ventral side, that is front side, with the sternum, and these are called true ribs. Then the 3, 8th, 9th and 10th attached properly dorsal side with vertebral column, but on the ventral side with 7th rib. These are called false ribs. And the last 2, 11th and 12th, which are attached dorsally to the vertebral column and ventrally they are lying free, they are called floating ribs. These 12 pair of ribs are attached to 12 thoracic vertebrae. I am sure children you remember in previous session I said vertebrae are named after the area they are located. So, thoracic vertebra, they are 12 in number and they are present in thoracic region, and 12 pair of ribs are attached to these 12 thoracic vertebrae. Now, 12 thoracic vertebrae plus 12 pairs of ribs plus that part of vertebral column, that is thoracic area, plus sternum, they together make rib cage. Rib cage is an important area. It is having heart and 2 lungs inside it. They are protected well by these ribs is one reason. Other reason, they are separated from abdominal cavity by diaphragm. This kind of arrangement will help in respiration for lungs and cardiac cycle or heartbeat or working of heart as far as circulation is concerned. So, you can appreciate the value of rib cage in our body, and now you also know how it is formed, and you already know that it is last part of axial skeleton, and now you definitely understand why it is part of axial skeleton, why it is coming as axis of the body. Now, we will discuss appendicular skeleton. Before that, I would like to show you one diagram of ribs so that you understand their placement in our body. This diagram shows the rib cage, and you can see position of ribs very clearly here. The first 7 pairs of ribs are attached to sternum. You can see attachment with the sternum. As far as vertebral column is concerned, all the 12 pairs are attached to vertebral column. This diagram will show you the attachment on the ventral side. So, first 7 pairs are attached with the sternum. You can see sternum in the center, solid structure, and then 8th, 9th and 10th they are attaching to the 7th rib, and the last 2 are floating. Floating ribs are very interesting and they have a special role to play. You can see the sternum which is having sternal angle, the body, and xiphoid process which is coming as a conical structure on the lower side. On the upper side you can see jugular notch and also clavicle. The clavicles are part of pectoral girdle, and as you can see the labeling, the first 7 are true ribs. After that 8th, 9th, 10th are false ribs, and 11th and 12th are floating ribs. 12 pairs of ribs attached to 12 thoracic vertebra, vertebral column and the sternum together are making the rib cage. After this, we proceed to appendicular skeleton. Children, you have already understood that skeleton has 2 major areas or divisions. One is axial skeleton, which we have discussed, and other is appendicular skeleton. Appendicular skeleton normally involves limb bones and the girdles, and both are important. Limbs are important, and to hold limbs in our body or to connect limbs to the body, girdles are important. Each limb, forelimb or hind limb, hand or leg, is having 30 bones, and their distribution is also very interesting. Let us first discuss the hand bone. You can see your own hand. The area from shoulder to the knee is having one bone, and this is called humerus. And from knee to wrist there are two bones called radius and ulna. You can see your little finger. The little finger side is ulna and other side is radius. So, we can also say ulnar border or radial border of the arm. Coming to the wrist, we have carpals, which is made up of 8 very small bones. They are very small in size, attached in a very critical complex way. Why? It will allow movement of wrist. If there was only one flat bone, then wrist could not move anywhere. So, these wrist bones, which are called carpals, are very important, and they are 8 in number. Coming to metacarpals or palm bone, there are 5 which will be holding 4 fingers and 1 thumb, and then phalanges or digits. These fingers are digits for us. They are having 14 bones, 3 in each finger, 3, 3, 3, 3, 12, and 2 in the thumb, 14. Now, this together makes 30 bones. So, each limb is having 30 bones, and each bone has a different role to play. You know, the bone humerus will allow movement of this area, whereas radius and ulna will allow movement of this area, wrist, this area, and palm bones, and then the fingers. You can understand the value of small bones in the body. Suppose our fingers had one long bone, then we could not move finger like this, it will remain like this. So, we have 3 bones, so we can move. Also, because of this arrangement, you are able to use your hand, your fingers, your thumb to hold the things, to write or to drive or to manage any instrument or hold the utensil, do the work, because you have those small bones in your fingers and the thumb. So, that is about the hand bone. Children, we discussed about the hand bones. Hand bones are also called arm bones. More correctly, we can call it forelimb. So, our 2 hands are our 2 forelimbs, and in this we have bones which I have explained you little before, and now I am explaining the same in this diagram. You can see humerus in the upper part of the arm, and then of course, elbow. We will discuss elbow when we discuss joints. You can see radius and ulna. The ulna is towards the little finger and radius is towards the thumb. So, that will decide which border of the hand, ulnar border and the radial border. You can see carpals or the wrist bones, and you can also see small bones in the phalanges or digits, or in our case fingers. Very clearly you can see 3 small bones in each finger and 2 small bones in the thumb. In the wrist, arrangement of carpals are in 2 lines, and there is very well defined important joint called elbow, which allows movement of the hand in almost all the directions except 1 and 2. You can see scapula, that is part of pectoral girdle, and also you can see clavicle. You are seeing part of rib cage and the sternum, and behind rib cage is the scapula, that is part of pectoral girdle. If you remember, in the beginning of this session I showed you skeleton, the dorsal side, which was showing scapula very prominently. So, these are arm bones or forelimb bones attached to the girdle, and we will now discuss about the girdle, pectoral girdle. Pectoral girdle, which is providing articulation surface for forelimb, is also having a special structure. It has 2 halves, one right half and one left half. Both are identical because both are going to provide articulation to forelimb of right side and other one to the left side. Coming to the structural part of pectoral girdle, we have clavicle, then we have scapula, and in the scapula one projected part near the shoulder is called spine, to which one small structure is formed. It is called acromion notch. Below this there is glenoid cavity. Why we call it cavity? Because in this cavity the head of bone humerus will fix. You remember when I was talking about the hand, I said this bone is humerus, and head of this bone will fix in the glenoid cavity of pectoral girdle. It is a particular kind of joint which we will discuss when we are discussing joint separately. For now, this is enough for you to understand that head of humerus fits nicely into the glenoid cavity of pectoral girdle and allows all kinds of movements of hand, and the bones which are forming pectoral girdle provide strength to the girdle. I will explain this in the diagram now. You can see articulation of upper limb or forelimb with the pectoral girdle. You can see the glenoid cavity and two clavicles, scapula. This broad portion is scapula, and the upper part is spine, which is projected as acromion process, and just below that you find glenoid cavity, which is going to allow the presence of head of humerus for total movement. So, children, in this session we have understood about ribs, attachment of ribs with vertebral column and the sternum, the kinds of ribs, the formation of rib cage, and also we discussed about appendicular skeleton, specifically the forelimbs and the pectoral girdle. With this we come to the end of this session. Thank you.